Hello, my name is Daniel. I'm with Iron Horse Chess. Today we're going to look at a very pretty position that comes to us from a composer by the last name Belyavsky. This position actually won first prize in a memorial composing tournament in 2008. So this article that I uncovered, it actually comes from chessbase.com, and I just saw the position and thought it was such a unique and very pretty conclusion to the position that I wanted to share it with you guys. So I definitely recommend heading over to ChessBase and checking out the original article. Um, it's chock full of good information, and I definitely recommend it. So going from that, we'll get into this position here a little bit. So if you haven't already, take a moment and take a look at the position, do a quick survey here, and see where white stands, see where black stands. Try to find some common ideas for white here. Try to locate some good candidate moves, and we will come back. Grab a pen or a pencil on a piece of paper, jot down some notes, and give yourself a good amount of time here. 10, 15 minutes, easy, and then pause the video, do that, and then come back and pick back up here. So go ahead and take that time now. Okay, coming back, we are gonna do a quick little overview. Hopefully you saw that white was an exchange and a pawn down. So he's behind in material. Black has, if it was black to move here, black has some definitely a killer move of queen takes h8 mate. So we always have to keep that in the back of our mind. We can't allow for the mate to happen as white. And so given that, we want to be as forcing as we can be. So to be forcing, we need to find some good checks or captures would be the first start that we're going to look for in terms of candidate moves. So any checks or captures on the board? Well, we see captures. We see rook takes d8. That's a good capture. We see knight takes d8. And then, this knight takes e5. It doesn't really lead to anything. That's just losing material. And that's all for the captures. Now, any checks on the board? We see a check on, queen to f5, and we see a check, queen f5, and we see a check on queen to g6. So that's at least an interesting idea. We'll look into each of these. The first one we want to look at, let's just start with knight takes d8. Okay, so knight takes d8. Well, this pretty much immediately loses to rook takes d1. White doesn't really have a good move here. So let's just kind of eliminate that one. The next one is going to be, let's say, rook takes d8. So after rook takes d8, black can either capture the rook or he can capture the knight. If he goes with the knight, so rook takes d1, then we actually do end up in a decent position here. So queen takes d1, rook takes d1, rook takes d1, and now, white is winning, but at the same time, it's going to be a fight. Black may still have some chances here to at least draw, and if white isn't careful and doesn't play perfectly, then black may technically come out as in winning here. So it's always risky. I don't think that this would be a terrible game, but at the same time, I don't. I think there's something better on the board. So going back, if we continue looking at the rook takes d8, the last time we looked at rook takes d1. So if we look at, let's say, rook takes d8, now black has entered into a line that actually is quite losing. So One thing to note here is that the rook was always guarding this e7 square, and the queen was guarding it before that, so well, helping guard before that. So now that this rook has abandoned this post of guarding this e7 square, it opens up some interesting tactics and lines here. So continuing to do an assessment here, again, now that we've had some captures and eliminated some pieces, do another look through the board, try to find some good candidate moves, try to find the most forcing line here. So go ahead and pause the video, take about 5 minutes, and calculate out some candidates and see if you can find the idea here for white. Okay, so if you found it, great. If not, you may take another minute or two and pause again and keep looking. But you're looking for checks and captures. So anything that is a check or capture is an ideal candidate to review right now, because we have to be as forcing as we can. So if you do a quick look at the board, you see this knight is blocking out this square here. I'll change that to red. So we know the king cannot go there, and we know that the queen has access to all of these squares right here. So that's blocking access to the f6 square, or sorry, f5 square and the g6 square. The king, the white king, is blocking access to the g7 square and the g5 square. So that's really boxing the black king in. So if we could deliver check in some way, then we could potentially deliver checkmate here. So we just have to find a good way to deliver check. So the only serious check on the board right now to consider, hopefully you found it, is queen to f5 check. So with queen f5 check, king takes f5, and then we deliver knight e3 check. King has to go back, so king goes to f6. Remember, the king cannot escape to the e7 square. So the next move, I mean, we could capture this rook, but then rook captures knight, and we're not really coming out ahead here. So the next move to look at is this knight g4 check. So with knight g4, the king is under check, and you see on the board, again, these squares are still off limits. So the king can only go to one square. He has to go back to f5. And now we see, because the rook abandoned that post of defending the e7 square, that allows the knight to come into e7 and actually deliver mate. Okay, so this is actually a mate that's found in the position. However, this is, showing an inferior line for black. Black does not have to capture on d8. So, even though the position, it's there, but, black doesn't have to take on d8. He can take on d1. Or he can take with the knight on d8. And that leaves the rook guarding the e7 square. So now, with the rook guarding the e7 square, we see the knight e3, we see knight takes c6, we have queen f5 check, king e7, knight takes d5 check, rook takes d5, and we find this position where white is probably a little better, but it's definitely going to be a fight. It's a challenge to win this. It's not as winning as we would have hoped for. So although probably still better, not the position that we're looking for. So we want to find basically what I would call magic on the board. So going back to the beginning, there. So we're back to the beginning. So the rook captures, the knight captures, those didn't really lead us to the position that we wanted, but we did find some key ideas here. We saw that this knight at c6 coming to e7 is an ideal an idea that we really need to keep in mind, because that helped us deliver the final checks. So I always want to keep in mind that trying to divert and deflect this rook or this queen off from this d7 or e7 square, sorry. So now looking at, let's eliminate some of this. There we go. So now looking at the position again, knowing that these rooks and knights don't affect as much as we thought, that those candidates don't really lead to the lines that we want. Take another minute or two and do another assessment and see what you can find in terms of the remaining candidate moves that may lead us to the win. Okay, so hopefully you found the right idea. The right idea here, obviously this queen to g6 and then pawn takes g6 doesn't really lead us to the position that we want. Just to show you on the board, queen g6, pawn takes g6, knight takes d8, rook takes d8, rook takes d8, rook takes d8, and then king h7, knight g5 check, king h6, and then rook h8 mate. So this does not lead us to the right position. So that doesn't quite work. So instead, the right move here is actually queen to f5 check. Now, I say it's the right move, but it's not quite the right move. And what we're going to see here is after king takes f5, we have this knight e3 check. But this leads us to the right idea. So knight e3 check, and then king goes to f6, knight g4 check, king comes to f5, knight e7 check, queen takes e7, knight e3 check, king f6, knight g4 check, and we actually get this perpetual. So the big problem here was here where I wanted, if you remember an earlier line that we saw, I wanted to be able to play knight e7 here and deliver mate. But the rook and the queen are both guarding e7. So it leads us to the right kind of idea. This queen f5 check actually does have some merit because it leads us into this. So queen f5 check is not quite the right idea. So that really brings us to this really troublesome, time period where we realize that we don't have a great candidate move. Where the knight takes doesn't work, the rook takes doesn't work, queen g6 doesn't work, queen f5 doesn't work. So you keep looking, and hopefully you uncover that this all stems back to that earlier idea of what was Black's plan. Black's plan was to play queen takes h8 mate. Okay, so take a moment and see, now that you know, I'm giving you another clue here. Take a moment and see if you can find the right candidate move that helps us keep that rook or queen takes rook at h8 mate from happening. Okay, so hopefully you took a minute or two. If you need to keep looking, then keep looking, but pause the video, don't head any further because you're going to find out. But the moment that we need to address is the queen takes h8 mate. So how do I keep this from happening? The best way to keep this from happening is to play the rook somewhere. So we see on the screen that the only good square for the rook to go is rook to g8. If rook h7, then this isn't forcing, this isn't winning. By rook h8, or rook g8, sorry, we have the idea, if Black wastes the next move, we have this idea of rook to g6 check, pawn takes g6, and then queen takes g6 mate. So that is the idea that we're going for. So black has to address this. So going forward, the main idea for black here is to take the rook. He can't allow this rook to g6 check because the next moves are forcing. So after queen takes g8, we come back to that original idea that we had before with the queen f5. But keep in mind, we still have a defender on this e7 square. So we're going to see a way of dealing with that. So let's play our idea. Queen f5 check. So king takes f5. And now take a moment and see if you can figure out how to get to the win from here. So now that we found this new position, take a moment, scour through, calculate out some candidate moves, and see if you can find the win. Okay, hopefully you took about 5 minutes or so to calculate all that out, double check your work, jot down some notes. So the move here is actually knight e7 check. So after knight e7 check, the rook is going to capture this knight. Okay, so rook captures e7, and now we have another check with knight e3 check. And now notice how even though the rook is defending the e7 square, he's sitting on the e7 square. So in effect, it actually blocks the king from heading out that square. So it also conveniently positions several pieces in the right place for what's to come next. So knight e3 check, king goes to f6, and now here's where it gets really, really pretty. Knight takes d5 check, king f5, knight takes e7 check, king f6, knight takes g8 check. The black king can't do anything. King f5, knight to e7 check, king f6, knight to d5 check, king f5, and now g4 mate. Very, very pretty. And it all comes from that rook to g8 move earlier. So hopefully you enjoyed this. Check out our website, ironhorsechess.com. At the moment, we were just getting started, so there's not a lot of products on the website at the moment. That more are to come, so be sure to check back with us. And then also check out the blog on our website called the Grindstone. And hopefully you really enjoyed this very pretty study position. I have to thank Belyavsky for creating this and for ChessBase for putting it on their website and sharing it with everybody and allowing me to discover it. So guys, I really hope that you enjoy this. Definitely also check out our YouTube channel and like and subscribe, and we'll have more of these videos to come. Thank you.